Ever felt like everything looks fine on the surface, but deep down, something's terribly wrong? A quiet town, familiar faces. Then a stranger shows up, silent, watching, like he knows what no one dares to say. But the real story, that's just beginning. What happens when a town is forced to face the truth it tried to bury? You won't want to miss this, dear listeners. Before we move forward, please subscribe my channel to hit 1,000 figure. We've all seen it happen. People turning a blind eye when they should have stood up. A neighbor getting harassed. A friend wrongfully blamed. Someone punished while the real guilty ones walk free. And sometimes those choices haunt us. Not with ghosts, but with silence. The kind of silence that weighs heavy on a town or a heart. In High Plains Drifter, it's not just a western, it's a reckoning. A whole town, Lago, hides a brutal truth. Years ago, they watched as a U.S. Marshal, Jim Duncan, was whipped to death in the middle of the street. Nobody stopped it. Nobody spoke up. Why? Because they were afraid. Or maybe because the marshal knew too much about their secrets. Now, time has passed. The town pretends to move on, but guilt doesn't just disappear, it simmers, like coals under ashes. And that's when he rides in. A stranger. No name, no past. Just a quiet rage in his eyes and a storm behind him. But here's the thing. He doesn't just walk into town. He invades it. Like a memory you've buried deep but can't forget. And from the moment he arrives, the town starts to feel off. It's not just fear. It's something deeper. Recognition. Like they've met him before, in a nightmare maybe. We all know what it's like to want justice. But what happens when justice knocks at your door in a form you can't recognize? Or worse, in the form of something you deserve. The sun's beating down hard on the dusty road. Lago looks the same as it always has. Quiet, plain, pretending. But then, out of the shimmering heat, he appears. No name, no smile. Just a man in black, riding slow, like he's in no hurry, but the kind of no hurry that makes people nervous. Like he already knows what's going to happen. That's the thing about the stranger. He doesn't need to say much. His silence is louder than most men's shouts. People feel it. The shopkeepers stiffen. The sheriff squints. The women peek through curtains. And somewhere, deep inside, the town remembers. But they don't want to remember. Still, they know. There's something about him. Maybe it's the way he looks at them, not just at them, but through them. Like he's measuring their guilt, like he knows every secret buried under their feet. He walks into the saloon. Doesn't ask for permission, doesn't ask for anything. And when trouble tries to test him, because there's always someone who tests the quiet ones, he ends it in seconds. Clean, cold, and without a blink. But here's the twist. He doesn't just come for revenge. He does something strange. He starts painting the entire town red. Not metaphorically, literally. Red paint on every wall, every building. Even renames the town sign to say hell. People don't understand. They whisper, they panic. But deep down, they feel it. This isn't justice. This isn't revenge. This is punishment. Slow, drawn out and meant to make them squirm. And the stranger, he just watches. As if he's done this before. As if he's been here before. That's when it hits you. Maybe this isn't just a man. Maybe this is the ghost of their guilt. Come back to make them pay. Lago had always believed it could bury the past beneath polite smiles and clean streets. As long as no one asked questions, the memory of that brutal night, the screams, the blood, the silence, could be locked away. But the stranger's arrival cracked something open. And now it was all pouring out. The townspeople grew restless. The tension was no longer under the surface. It was everywhere. You could see it in their darting eyes, in the way the preacher stammered through his sermons, and the way the sheriff polished his badge with shaking hands. The stranger wasn't just unsettling them. He was forcing them to look in the mirror. And what they saw there wasn't pretty. Then came the preparation. The stranger forced them to do things they didn't understand, train with guns, dig trenches, build defenses. He wasn't protecting the town. He was preparing it, like a stage before a show. And the show? A reckoning. But this isn't the kind of Western where the hero rides in to save the day. This is something colder, sharper. A moral reckoning wrapped in a six-shooter. The stranger's presence stirred old fears, especially in the men who had stood by while Marshal Duncan was murdered in the street. They thought they were safe now. They thought the killers they hired had been silenced, buried along with the truth. But justice doesn't stay buried. Word comes. The same men they betrayed, the same outlaws they paid off to kill the marshal, are heading back to Lago, fresh out of prison, angry, and they remember exactly who turned on them. Now the town wants the stranger's help. Suddenly, the man they feared becomes their last hope. But he doesn't offer comfort, no stirring speeches, no promises. He just says, "You're going to have to defend what you let happen." It's chilling, isn't it? That moment when you realize your only protection is the very thing you tried to bury. And when the day arrives, the sun bleeds red across the sky, like it knows what's coming. The streets are quiet, too quiet. Then the gunfire starts. It's loud, messy, chaotic. Bullets crack through windows. Men scream and the air turns thick with dust and gunpowder. The town is under siege, not just from outlaws, but from its own past. The people who stood silent now face the consequences of their silence, and in the middle of it all, the stranger moves like a ghost through smoke, calm, controlled, almost otherworldly. He doesn't protect the town, he exposes it. Makes sure every lie, every betrayal comes to the surface. This isn't just a gunfight. It's a ritual. A town forced to watch its own sins come home to roost. And the man leading that reckoning, he's not just a stranger anymore. He's the echo of a justice that was never served. When the last shot is fired, there's no cheer, no celebration, just silence. Lago stands broken, smoke rising from shattered windows, blood soaking into the dirt, buildings scorched by the fire of their own fear. The men they once called heroes are gone. The masks they wore as decent folk? Burned away. There's no one left to hide behind. And the stranger? He walks through the wreckage without a scratch, like he'd never been part of the fight, just a witness to it. People watch him, but no one speaks. What could they say? Thank you. For what? For forcing them to see themselves clearly for the first time? And then comes the moment, the one that chills deeper than any bullet ever could. The stranger rides slowly toward the edge of town. He passes by the graveyard, where a fresh headstone now stands. The name carved into the stone, Marshal Jim Duncan. That's when it all clicks. He wasn't a man sent to save the town. He was a reminder, a reflection, a spirit born of guilt, rage, and betrayal. Some say he was the marshal, returned from the grave to deliver justice with his own hand. Others say he was something more symbolic, a force, a conscience they couldn't escape. But one thing is certain. Lago didn't just face gunmen. It faced its past. And the past, once unearthed, has a way of refusing to go quietly. As the stranger disappears into the horizon, the townsfolk are left standing in their shame, alive but hollowed out. They wanted protection. What they got was truth. And truth is the heaviest burden of all. Because here's the bitter lesson. Justice delayed is justice transformed. It doesn't knock politely. It rides in with dust and fire. And it doesn't care if you're ready. High Plains Drifter may be a Western, but it's really a mirror. A reflection of what happens when a community chooses silence over courage, comfort over truth. And that's not just some distant town in a dusty movie. That's something we've seen, and still see, in real life. History is full of towns, companies, even entire nations that stood by while wrongs were done, where people whispered, looked away, or told themselves, "It's not my problem." But the truth? It always becomes your problem. Sooner or later, silence comes at a cost. A 2021 study from Harvard found that in environments where unethical behavior is ignored, even bystanders experience long-term stress, regret, and moral injury. Not acting, they found, can be just as damaging to the soul as committing the act itself. And in High Plains Drifter, Clint Eastwood doesn't just show us revenge. He shows us the weight of collective guilt, the cost of doing nothing, the way justice, when left to rot, doesn't disappear. It mutates into something colder, more brutal. That's why this story hits so deep. Because we've all been Lago at some point. We've all stood at that invisible line, knowing we should speak, act, intervene, but didn't. The stranger? He's that voice inside us, the one we push down, the one that remembers, the one that comes back, not always with guns, but with truth. And truth, as this story shows, doesn't just walk in politely. It paints the town red,